What project can cover economics, entertainment, fashion, and major movements in only 2.5 minutes? This one. Welcome back to the Lesson Lab, the show that equips teachers with time saving, grading strategies, and meaningful lessons that create a lasting impact on teachers and students in the classroom. We scaffold these lessons every week and we run each assignment through the gauntlet and reflection. The Gauntlet is a 5 question checklist that ensures we're creating impactful lessons and saving time when grading. The 5 questions for the Gauntlet are: number one, why is this assignment important? Why? Number two, what are the goals, both long term and short term? Number three, how does it save the teacher time grading? Four, how is it fun? Number five, how long should each project or assignment last? The assignment I'm running through the gauntlet today is the Decades Project. After the gauntlet, I'll talk about the details of each assignment so you can implement them in your own classroom. So, why is this assignment important? So, research and creativity are really two things that you can't live without in our modern society. So this is a place very early in the beginning where I get them or push my students to embrace these and challenge their own research and creativity. There's so much to take from to craft a presentation when we're talking about a singular decade, right? That is 10 years of stuff to cover. And we have our 6 different topics in which they have to cover for their decade. So it pushes them to research and be creative. And then that jumps into our second question, which is what's the goal? So efficient with time is definitely one of the high priority things I like to push in my classroom, because in life you don't have as much time as you think you do. One of my keys for the day that's always up on my whiteboard is don't waste time, because we usually are wasting more of it than we think we are. So definitely efficiency with time and being concise with details, because you can't cover an entire decade in 2.5 or 3 or 4 minutes, right? That is 10 years, but you can certainly try. Number three, how does it save the teacher time grading? So I've talked about this on my other episodes where I have a project, there are checkpoints. And so as far as saving time grading, you don't have to grade every single little thing. So as we talk about the different spots, we have the outline, there's the practice, there's the presentations. You're going to save time where you need it most. And with presentations, I typically will grade them, not typically, I always grade them live. So by the time they sit down, students have to grade. I don't even have to go back and do anything with that. That's going to save time. Practice presentations are graded on a participation basis, where I have 3 different ways I grade things. Are you actually grading it? Are you glancing at it? Or is it just participation? Practice is definitely one of those participation spots. And then with our outlines, those are more glancing. And then the presentations are actually graded, fine tooth comb. And we do that with rubrics, but this is going to save you time because you're not grading every single little thing. You're not going to be staying after class, after hours are over, to grade meticulously every practice video or every outline or every PowerPoint. That is out of the window. I don't do that. So, how is it fun? Question number 4 of the gauntlet. So they'll learn that, as far as my class is concerned, it is going to be as fun, or as boring as they make it. The power is theirs for the entire semester. So if you want to take a project like this where you study a decade and you talk about our different topics, which I will get to, then you're going to make that as cool as you want to make it. The problem is when students are just focused on getting the grade and not being engaging and not having fun, that's where you start to get a lot of boring stuff. So I make them, or I try to get them to make it relevant based on their real life experiences. That is something that I think relevancy is always useful. I get them to create. That's always a way to have fun, is when you have creative control over what you're doing, what you're making. And I always get them to share. So we submit outlines and presentations via a discussion post where people are able to see other people's work. Now you may go, aren't you worried about cheating on something like that? Well, if we're doing a presentation and you just flat out copied somebody else's stuff, we're all going to be able to see it. So there are some other things in place to prevent that as well. And then I cannot talk about having fun without talking about groups and group sizes. 4 is kind of my magic number. Anything more, people can hide. Anything less, and the work could get to be a bit much for 3 people, because my projects can be pretty vast depending on which ones we do. And then the last thing I use to help them to have more fun is to challenge them. The fun for that comes with the requirements, which can change based on the project and based on the teacher. Spinning the wheel versus letting them choose something. So that adds an element of fun. And I'll talk about that when I talk about the details. Almost there. Last question, number 5. How long does this project last? So in totality, about 2 weeks, or 10 days rather. So if we just start here with the outline, that is going to take 3 or 4 days, depending on, how much time you want to give your students, your groups to work. It could be maybe up to 5 if we're going to count also the presentation creation. So PowerPoint, Prezi, Canva, whatever they use to create. The first 2 days are just spent on the outline, which I talked about in a previous episode. But these outlines are there for them to get all of their thoughts out, to cover everything. Because as you know, once we get to creating a presentation or a PowerPoint, you can't use everything that you have researched, right? Your PowerPoint will be too cluttered. There will be too much information for you to even be able to cover in a timely manner. So the first 2 days, in my mind, are all about doing your research and putting your outline together for our Decades project. Now, the Decades project is each group gets a 10-year period from, I think I did it just like ever, as much research as you can get nowadays. I just let them decide. And I actually have some thoughts on that soon. But you take a 10-year period and you have to cover 6 topics. The cost of something common. This could be like a loaf of bread, an admission to a community event. Something common differs depending on, the time period. But the more relevant, again, we can make it, the better. Entertainment, so music, art, sports, etc. Fashion, commonly worn items. What are the shirts, dresses, so on and so forth. Major events. This could be a war, an election, a natural disaster. Major figures. The people who have basically painted the decade. The people we can't tell the story of the decade without. And then major movements. The Renaissance, Great Depression, the Tech Revolution, Reconstruction. So it's almost a history project in a speech class, which I think is great when you're talking about cross-curricular development and direction for our students. So this could work in a couple of different areas. So the first 2 days, we're starting with the outline, gathering everything, and I tell them you can tell it from 2 different perspectives. You can go third-person narrative, think like a documentary, or this is the more challenging way to do it, but I think will come off really well. I didn't have anybody do this. A first-person conversation between 2 friends in that decade. So now it's almost like you are playing a character where you can act like somebody from the 1950s or the 1850s or the 1750s And you can talk about these 6 different categories in that way. I can't wait until this semester starts so I can really try to get somebody to do that second option. But a lot of people will go with that first one, and they have to cover those topics. And you have to do enough research for you to be able to tell the story of the decade within a lot of time. Now, the way that they are going to do that is they're going to take that information from the outline and put it into a presentation. So PowerPoint, Canva, Prezi are the 3 ones that I like to go to. And that, I'm saying, should take about 2 days. Now, if it was one person doing this, I would think that is a lot of work for one person. But there are 4. So divide that work up, do the outline, do the research. Then we're going to talk about getting that same stuff into our presentation. So they have to create visual aids for most projects. And as long as their presentation has all of the requirements, they have full creative control. I'm not going to nitpick their PowerPoints or whatever they make. I try to urge them now to only use the keywords given in the outline to build their presentation. Because the worst thing that you can do is have tons of words and paragraphs and all of these sentences. It takes away from the power of the outline. It takes away from the power of the presentation, right? They're 2 different things. So the best practice is to only use the keywords. And then, of course, you want to use relevant pictures that capture people's imagination about said decade. So there are some best practices here when you start to use the outline and then start to create the presentation. From there, the next thing that we want to do, and this will typically fall on the Monday. So we'll start this project on the Monday. Take a week to really do your research, do your outline, put a great presentation together. That's about, 12-ish slides. And then the next week, we start the practice. I talk about this every time I do an episode about a project, is if you don't make them practice, if you don't make students practice, most of them will not. And their presentations are going to be worse. And then I'm going to be sitting at my desk like, this sucks. What happened to my presentation? What happened to my project? You guys are ruining it. So it's very important that you allow in-class time to practice. And from there, if everyone is practicing, I can walk around, I can give tips, I can give pointers, I can say, nah, don't do that, do this. Don't sit down while you practice because you're not going to be sitting down when you present. So there are all these different ways that I can help them during that practice time. If you just leave practice up to them on their own time, it doesn't work as well as this way. I've tried it, I've done it, and now I implement a practice time, designated practice day, the full class period. So if you got 45, 50, an hour, however much time you have, a full class period to that practice. And they have to submit 3 videos, go all the way through. So talk about each decade, or not each decade, talk about each part, each topic, and then transition from one person to the next. I think one of the best things that you can do is talk about entertainment, so to speak. I would go this year in 2016, the Cleveland Cavaliers visited the White House where they had the first black male president who was a major figure in our time. So that is a easy way that I would show the students to transition from one topic where we're talking about entertainment to major figures where we're talking about a president or someone of that nature. So if they're practicing in class, then it's easier for me to be able to not hold their hand, but to give some pointers as I'm walking around. Now, you're not going to be able to listen to every group's 3 practices and hopefully more at all times. So there's really going to be some ownership that they need to take. And I also show them Presenter Coach, which is something useful to record in PowerPoint, and it gives them tips. The AI gives them tips. So that's one way that AI is definitely really helping us in this area. Of course, they have to remember their high fives, which I've talked about in the previous video as well. And then my tips for each video, right? We're breaking down the practice videos. Use your outline the first time. Just read it, or read your PowerPoint all the way through. Okay, let's just see how long that is. That's fine. No big deal. First time through. The next time, we're only going to use our keywords. So from here, we're not just reading. We're remembering and regurgitating that information that we already know. If you don't know your presentation, let's just start over. Let's take a step back. Let's actually know our information. The third time, we're going to just use our keywords. We're going to do less staring at the PowerPoint or less staring at our presentation. And we're really going to try to engage with the audience starting on that third practice video. And then same on the fourth, fifth, however many practice videos that it takes them to get it right or do it well. Then the more they do that, the better they'll be, where they're not just staring. Now, can they use note cards? I used to be a stickler for this, but I do not care anymore. Use a note card if you want to. If you feel like you need it, if it helps you to stay organized, use a note card. Fine. If you do not need to use a note card, that's okay. But you can kind of have some of the same problems whether you use one or not. If you're staring at a note card the whole time, it doesn't work. If you're staring at your presentation the whole time, it doesn't work. So either way, it's really best practice to know as much of your information as you can. So with these presentations, get into when we start the presentations, which would be on a Tuesday, ideally. They're going to be about 3 to 4 minutes. 2.5 minutes is the threshold that they can't go under, because if they do, then they're not going to receive anything over a 50. Because you can just game the rubric. If you go, okay, I'll lose 12 points, for time, and get an 88 if I do a great presentation, but it's not as long as everybody else's. So there are these little tidbits I've learned along the way that I've implemented into my projects so that nobody's gaming the system. So as they're presenting, I have the rubric up. Our learning management system has a rubric function where I just plug everything in, tap, 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 4 minutes, and it's over. Everything is graded. They sit down and then they do their self-critique questions, which are usually, what did you do well? What could you have done better? How did the class goals help for this assignment, which I've covered in the previous episode, how to make class goals. Check that out. And then what will you do differently for the next project? Because everything we do in my class is a project. So the next episode that you hear is going to be first a reflection for this one, and then the next project that I'll be teaching for my class. So that covers the decades project. I've talked about the outline, the high fives rubric in previous episodes as well. You can go and check them out. And these are the details. Now, before we get out of here, remember, you can get the resources from this episode, the Decades Project, and others on the Teachers Pay Teachers website. Just search Lesson Lab Tony Rambles. Also run a Facebook group filled with fun, supportive teachers called Teacher Triumphs, where we help each other through classroom burnout. It is an epidemic across the world, and people need help. And sometimes you just need to joke around with some other teachers and have some good fun, but we can also put stuff out there and challenge each other and build each other up. So definitely go to the links in the description to join the Teacher Triumphs Facebook group, as well as get the resources for this episode. Until next time, keep teaching, keep learning, and I will see you all in the next one.